The space-time vortex was a whirlpool of paradox, a dimension where reality was only a matter of timing, and the universe was but a larger-than-average singularity. As if to reflect this knowledge, at least one of the craft that traveled there was equally paradoxical, being a sprawling technological pocket dimension tucked away inside a battered wooden and concrete shell. Enclosed in the walls of a police telephone box from a small island in Earth's mid-20th century, the circuitry of an antiquated Type 40 Gallifreyan time capsule hums steadily. The capsule's owner, by right of possession at least, was a tall man with dark curly hair. A very expressive face surrounded his long nose and wide piercing eyes. His chocolate-brown overcoat blended in with the darkness of the small room in which he stood, though the garish stripes of a very long scarf which was looped around his shoulders several times stood out rather better. As well as being very dark, the room was also almost empty. The only furnishings were a Victorian iron safe and a plain table. He looked at the trio of opalescent crystalline chunks in his hands, weighing them with a puzzled expression. "Now," he murmured to himself, "how did she do that again?" A delicate feminine hand plucked the crystals from his grip. The hand belonged to a tall, slim woman in a simple red skirt and top. She had a classically modeled face with high cheekbones and lustrous dark hair that fell about her shoulders.
"It's like this, Doctor,"
she said, putting one crystal on the plain table and then sliding the other two pieces onto it to form a jagged half-cube. "Ah, Romana, that's showing off, you know." Romana only cocked an eyebrow. The doctor cleared his throat loudly, then handed her a slim probe lined with strange filaments and a few simple electronic keys set into the handle. "Why don't you go and see where the next segment is?"
"All right."
She turned and went back into the console room. The doctor crouched down, his eyes level with the three linked crystalline segments on the worktop. "How does she do that, K9, huh?" He lifted the assembled chunk of jagged crystal and waggled the most recently attached segment as if it were a loose tooth. The other occupant of the room was a boxy and squared-off metal construction with tiny dish antennae for ears and a long aerial for a tail. It looked not unlike a dog that had either been bred for René Magritte or come off worse in a fight with a car crusher. K9's central processor calculated, based on statistics of past behavior, that the doctor was tempted to disassemble it in order to try to put it together himself, but wasn't willing to risk the embarrassment of probable failure. All the evidence he had gathered indicated that humanoids required occasional reassuring interpretations of the facts for their continued psychological well-being.
"Beginner's luck, Master."
"What? Beginner's luck?" The doctor leaped up into a standing position. "A fluke, that's it, of course. Anyone can get lucky from time to time." He looked down at K9 and put a finger to his lips, coughing discreetly. "We'd better not tell Romana that it was just luck. I mean, we don't want to hurt her feelings, do we?"
"Negative, Master."
Of course, K9 had also observed that the doctor's behavior seemed to be more of a rebellion against being conscripted than anything else. The TARDIS had been diverted from a planned holiday to Harlingen 3 by a being the doctor referred to as the White Guardian, though K9's databanks were blank on that subject. The White Guardian had instructed the doctor to seek out the 6 segments of the key to time, so that a universal balance might be restored. So far they had recovered 3 segments, and had just left Earth after capturing the 3rd. This achievement hadn't mollified the doctor very much as far as K9 could tell. Then again, the doctor had never shown any sign of enjoying doing other people's dirty work. K9 was a little unsure of the meaning of the doctor's oft-used phrase, but assumed it had something to do with exertive sweating. "No." The doctor's voice trailed off as a flicker of light rippled through the crystal. "Well, that's odd." He moved around the table to position himself between the crystal and the only door, presumably wondering if it was a refraction of light coming in from outside. The light continued to waver across the opalescent crystal like wind-blown rain trickling down a window. The doctor looked back over his shoulder. "Romana!" He turned back. "K9, what do your senses tell you about that?" A probe antenna was set between the glowing red photoreceptors that served as K9's eyes, and he directed this antenna towards the assembled segments. The segments of the key to time were highly charged with energies he couldn't identify at the best of times, and this was no exception.
"Energy levels have not increased. Beyond that, I cannot postulate."
Romana ran back in, sliding to a halt at the table.
"What's wrong?"
"I'm not sure. Look." He nodded towards the assembled crystal's luminescent display. None of the segments have ever done that before. Romana bent to examine it.
Could it be a natural part of its function? Perhaps it starts glowing after reaching a critical mass and increases with each subsequent segment.
There is one way to tell. The doctor tentatively touched the crystal as if expecting it to be hot, but then grabbed it firmly and pulled the 3 segments apart. They each continued flickering softly. So much for that theory. I wonder, could this be some sort of interference from the Black Guardian trying to snatch the segments?
The defense shield is still on.
The doctor gave his peculiar facial shrug. The White Guardian was able to totally control the TARDIS while the shield was on. Ah! Romana stepped back involuntarily at his exclamation.
What?
The Black Guardian would have equal power. So if this was him, why not simply stop the TARDIS and take it? His face fell. Of course, in my experience, the opposition always goes for the opposite style, too.
Stealth and subtlety.
Yes, can't think why. Unless it's just more fun that way. Outwitting someone is always an ego boost, isn't it? She raised a delicately arched eyebrow.
That sounds like a confession to me.
The doctor ignored her comment, gathering up the segments and tossing them unceremoniously into the safe. If it's a diversion, then we'll ignore it. He marched out of the room. Outside the small dark room was a large white room, with glowing circular indentations set into the walls. In the center of the room, a glass cylinder rose and fell at the heart of a sloped hexagonal console atop a pedestal. A rather battered hat of greenish-brown felt was slouched atop the column. The 6 panels of the console were awash with old-fashioned knobs and dials that were a peculiar contrast to the sophisticated energies they controlled in order to guide the TARDIS safely through the vortex. The wand-like probe the doctor had given Romana was lying on the navigational panel, so the doctor scooped it up and slotted it into a small socket. This was the locator muter core, designed to locate each segment and then transmute it from its disguised state into its real form. It crackled slightly, and numbers began flickering across the navigational display. The doctor peered at them. Interesting. They've only changed by a couple of digits. That just takes us back to Earth. Romana shook her head.
Surely there wouldn't be 2 segments hidden on Earth?
Maybe that's what any searchers are supposed to think. The doctor programmed in the specified coordinates and threw the dematerialization switch. We have no choice but to check. An Opel truck and a couple of Citroens had just passed across the bridge when a strained mechanical groaning insinuated itself into the night air from no apparent source. A yellow light glowed faintly in the air, and a British Metropolitan Police telephone box coalesced just where one of the bridge's walkways joined the pavement opposite the buildings. After a moment, the door opened, and the doctor emerged, jamming a well-worn hat onto his mop of curls. He stepped out onto the road and looked around with wide-eyed interest as Romana and K9 followed him. The doctor locked the TARDIS doors. Romana turned in a slow circle, holding the tracer out in front of her. When it was pointing across the river but off to the right of the bridge, it started to tick. It wasn't the normal crackle with which it reacted to a segment of the key to time, but a slow, steady ticking.
It's never done that before,
she murmured. The doctor grabbed the tracer out of her hand and tapped it on the nearest girder. He held it to his ear with a frown. I told you never to trust these gimmicky gadgets. We don't really know much about Guardian technology. Maybe it slipped a gear or something. He handed it back to her. Or maybe we've just materialized too far away from the source this time.
Where are we, anyway?
The wickedest city in the world. Despite this apparently worrisome phrase, the doctor seemed delighted by the surroundings, insofar as K9's behavioral analysis software could tell.
Well, that really narrows it down.
Paris of the East. The whore of China. We're in Shanghai, unless somebody has stolen the Waibedu Bridge, since that's what we're standing on. Probably the 1930s, going by those cars that just passed. Romana looked back at the ticking tracer, then over the river towards the European-style buildings beyond.
It's definitely coming from that direction. Have you any ideas what's over there?
The main business district. It's been a couple of centuries since I was last here.
When was that?
1941? He started off along the bridge. Not a very pleasant time, especially with those stranded Alpha Centauris panicking all over the place. What a first contact to make with their nearest neighbors.